Hello everyone and welcome to CircTex. My name is Teresa Domenech and I'm the PI of this project, which has been awarded funded by the UK Circular Economy Hub. CircTex is about material flow analysis and estimation of carbon emissions of textiles flows at the urban level, taking London as our case study. CircTex Teams is made up of three main organizations: UCL, Institute for Sustainable Resources, where I'm from, which will be leading on the scientific and academic side of the project; London, which will be leading on the engagement side of this project, very importantly; and Circular Economy, which is a consultancy in the area of circular economy, which will be providing support to the project. Why CircTex, and how did we came up with this idea of a project around fashion textiles in London? Well, we know that cities consume a large amount of resources. Around 75% of the world resources are consumed in cities. We know also that cities generate large volumes of waste. Textiles are one of those key sectors which contribute to highest usage of raw materials, but also is the fifth sector in terms of greenhouse gas emissions globally. And this is a problem also for the UK and specifically for London. London has set very ambitious targets in the city to increase circularity and to become carbon neutral by 2030. And this project aims to contribute to those policy objectives by identifying and assessing circular economy opportunities for transforming the UK fashion textile sector. The main element that generated the idea for this project is the lack of evidence. The evidence base currently doesn't exist, and it's very difficult to support this transition towards a more circular fashion textile sector if we don't have enough evidence to understand where are the key material flows, what happens at the different stages of the life cycle of textiles, and how we can increase, or what are the leverage points that we can tweak in the system to increase circularity. Current data gaps result in a very fragmented picture of textile flows and associated upstream and downstream impacts, so from extraction of the fibers up to the end of life of textiles. We need to understand those hotspots. We need to have a better understanding of the relationship between textile flows and their environmental and carbon impact. And identifying those hotspots is what will enable us to design very effective circular interventions to stimulate a circular value in the UK textile system. So with that in mind, the key objectives of these projects are to create an integrated modeling framework which combines material flow analysis and carbon accounting for textile flows, to test that modeling framework for one specific case study, which in this case is London. And London has been selected for a number of reasons, because it's a big hub of design, fashion, textile design, and also because it's a hub of textile manufacturing and use. London consumes huge amount of textiles and also one of the leading contributors to textile waste in the UK. We also have as a main objectives to engage and consult with key city stakeholders. We don't want our project to be only a modeling exercise. We want this project to have an impact on the stakeholders and to impact the way we use and we produce textiles in the city. So the idea is that we will engage with stakeholders along the whole supply chain, value chain of fashion textiles, from designers, producers, users, and recyclers or remanufacturers, to try to identify what key interventions can be implemented in the system. And based in all the above, the idea is to generate a methodological framework that will help us to assess circularity of textiles, and that can be replicated at different scales, for example, at the UK level or regional level, and can be also potentially be applied to other resource areas which might be of interest, like food or plastics, for example. CircTex methodology has three main components. One is the material flow analysis model, which I mentioned before, then is the emissions model, and then, very importantly, the scenarios. The material flow analysis model will provide us with a system overview of the flow of textiles in London. It will trace materials from the extraction of the fibers to production of fabrics, manufacturing of fashion items, use and end of life, and potentially recirculation of textiles. And it will consider trade flows at different stages. So very importantly, it will consider imports and exports at all the different stages of the life cycle of fashion textiles. Then we have the emissions model. The emissions model will help us to understand what is the embodied and direct emissions associated with textile flows in London. It will help us to understand which flows of textiles have a larger amount of greenhouse gases embodied in them, and how we can design interventions that could be meaningful from the point of view of addressing both wastage of resources but also reduction of carbon emissions. And the third key component of the project is the scenarios. The scenarios will be generated to compile different approaches or different pathways to increase circularity of the system and to understand carbon implications and also the type of interventions that are needed to increase circularity and what will be the impact of those three different scenarios. We'll generate three different scenarios which will portray three different pathways towards circularity and towards reduction of carbon emissions in the textile sector. And we will discuss that with the key stakeholders. We will try to understand from the key stakeholder events which of the scenarios are more feasible or could bring greater impact and greater value to the whole value network of fashion textiles. CircTex wants to achieve a number of key main outcomes. It wants to achieve a number of key main publications, but also it wants to actually change the way fashion flows circulate in London. And we have a combination of different types of outcomes. So we will have scientific publications, we will also be writing a report, but very importantly, we will be holding stakeholder events with all involving all stakeholders across the value network of fashion textiles in London. And we will be engaging with discussion with them that will then end up in policy recommendations and a policy brief, which will be published as part of this project. So at the end of the day, what we want to achieve with CircTex is to create an evidence base for impactful interventions in fashion. We want to understand where the opportunities lie and how can we quantify those opportunities and how can we engage different stakeholders to achieve and to realize those opportunities to increase circularity and reduce carbon emissions associated with fashion textiles in cities. So if you are interested, you want to take part in these stakeholder events, please get in touch, and thank you very much. Bye.